Holly, this is just so fun to have you here today. I think I've been looking forward to connecting with you for over a year. We had actually a possibility of it, and then it fell through, and then another possibility. But today, even though we are not in the same room, we are in the same state, I believe, in Oregon. But for those who haven't yet discovered the deep well of wisdom that is Holly, she is a brilliant writer, just lush, immediate prose. My God, I just went back and read a few. Well, I've been doing my research for the last couple of weeks, but just now I read one of your essays, The Sword and the Saguaro. I want everyone to read that essay, and we'll talk about it. Anyway, I'm going to gush for a minute, but you're also an editor and a nomad. Someone who I think truly embodies the art of living unfixed. And we'll get into why I think that. But from what I've learned through your essays and the memoir chapters that you have shared on Substack, you have shaped a life outside of the usual scripts, embracing a kind of inner and outer freedom that is absolutely hard-earned, wrestling with the complexities of life, but shared with this playful lightness of heart and a deep reverence for the beauty and mystery of life. So here we are with Holly.
That was a really sweet, beautiful introduction. Now I've been looking forward to, like you said, we've tried to connect a couple times, and it's just so good to see your face.
I know. It is wild. We know each other so deeply through the Substack platform. And yet, truly, there are some writers, I have no idea what their face looks like. Their icon might be a flower or something. And so it's so uniquely special to fall in love with people and not have any sense of the physical form. Yeah. So anyway, I want to begin with a quote. I have a couple of my favorite quotes here with me, but for one of the quotes that you wrote, I think this was actually in one of your memoir chapters. You said, "To be stuck for as far back as I can remember has been my greatest fear. Every decision I've made, be it career or relational, to stay or to go, to save or to spend, has been in the name of freedom. Mine or theirs, which is for me movement, which is for me love." And that it's just like such a perfect distillation of my experience of you. So let's begin by talking a little bit about this decision of yours to have a nomadic lifestyle, and how has that changed you?
Yeah, so I have been drawn to a nomadic lifestyle for like as long as I can remember. Like when I was a kid and we would go on vacation, and I just love watching the road out my window and pretend like I was going to stay wherever we were. Like we'd be, hiking in the canyons, and I would pretend like I was going to stay in the canyons and make it home. So it's been a lifelong thing. And this van is not my first time being in a nomadic life. I've lived in a 26-foot RV called the Leprechaun many, many years ago, which was way too big for me. I have lived off a bicycle for a while. That was for like a month and a half with just everything in my panniers on the bike. And then I did a 7-month trek up the U.S. East Coast with a backpack. And so I've lived in a truck for a while. I've just done a lot of different periods of living in ways that are not, brick and mortar. But I've lived in brick and mortar spaces too. I'm very much a stand person.
It's interesting that you knew this from a young age. And it wasn't really like, I don't think people were talking so much about the nomadic lifestyle back when I was young. I mean, we would get, people would have RVs in the Midwest and they would go on a trip, but it wasn't sort of a chosen lifestyle, except for some of the misconceptions that people have about that. So I want to clear that up just as we get started. Like, I think tell me probably some things you've even encountered on the road. What are some of these misconceptions about this lifestyle?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I guess I don't know for sure. I mean, I think I often, and this Ruby is I'm in Ruby the van right now. She's a little bit
Mhm.
janky, especially on the outside. She's old. This was like in 1996. She's scratched up, and I think there are a lot of I get seen as like being down and out a lot of
Mhm.
the time, and I have a funny relationship with that because I have felt like, oh, like push back against that, and then I'm like, what is wrong with you? Like, what? There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Um, so that's been an interesting thing for me to confront. I don't really know what
Yeah.
other misconceptions people have, but probably a lot.
Well, I mean, of course, you've seen Nomadland, correct?
Yes, I have. Yes.
One of the things that was just so beautiful that came out of that was this wild sense of community that I think, we don't have living on our crowded neighborhood streets in downtown Portland. And is that something, I mean, was that stereotypical, or is that something that you've really experienced, this larger world, larger sense of community?
I think that kind of also just depends on it's a person to person thing. There is absolutely the opportunity for it. And I'll say that I actually met Bob Wells, the guy that he's a lot of the people in Nomad Land are actually nomads.
Yeah.
And Bob Wells is the guy that kind of looks like Santa Claus with the long beard in Quartzsite, where Frances McDormand's character goes to kind of learn the ropes. So I
Mhm.
went to that same gathering, and that Nomadland certainly shows one way of living on the road. But there's a lot of different. There's people that are digital nomads in big, huge, expensive. There's like 300, $400,000
Yeah.
vans out there, which is crazy. But yes, to your question, I have met just some really special people that I consider my I call them my road family, that we meet up again whenever we happen to be in the same area code, and there's all kinds of gatherings for nomads that so yeah, lots of community opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, one of the other things I remember you said, one of my favorite things about nomading is the people I'm sharing the road with. While circumstances can and do play a role, life without walls very often is or becomes a deliberate choice to live differently than the norm. And with that comes seeing differently. So tell me how your vision has changed in this.
That's a really great question. I mean, one really obvious thing is that I spend a lot of time in sort of what you think of as wild spaces. And
Mhm.
so to wake up in the morning and you wake up, I have tons of windows. I wake up when the sun comes up and I step outside and there's, maybe jackrabbits running around or lots of uh, birds singing. And I've, seen coyotes and I've had coyotes surround my van one night. I think that it helps you to have this perspective where it's more like a bird's eye view perspective.
Mhm.
Um, and literally, I often will climb, like, say, there's a ridge outside my window that I think, oh, I'm going to get to that one day and I can climb. And I remember, like, there was this ridge I wanted to get to in the Arizona desert and climbing to the top of it and looking down and I could see these like patterns of where the nurse plants saguaros aren't nurse plants but mesquites or ironwoods and then all this growth patterns that would just like continue on and like in this particular moment I was really close to the border and there was like uh, a hut with the border guards that I had just seen the day before and um, it was out and just the desert doesn't know boundaries like that and I don't know. I think I'm just trying to get to the sort of also another way of maybe looking at life differently is that you have to have everything with you that you need,
Mhm.
and you need so much less than you generally have,
Yes. Yeah.
which is kind of fun to be reminded of. I have a lot. I packed this van with a lot of things, but
Well, but comparatively to anyone, that has to fill rooms and rooms and rooms, it feels like your decision to live unfixed in a way is unfixed in the sense of locale, it's liberating you from this idea that most of us wake up thinking we need to have these things in order to be happy. To me, and I do really read a lightness and a playfulness in your words, and that doesn't exclude hardship and all of that. But I wonder sometimes if some of that I'm feeling from you is a result of this pared down existence to the things that really matter.
Yeah, I think that that does resonate. I think that that does ring true.
Hmm. Yeah.
Experience, and kind of to your point about the connections on the road too, you have to get in so quick. You have to, which I think happens with a lot. I mean, I think it happens probably with a lot of the people that we meet on Substack too, and that's a lot of the way that you form such close relationships, as people are just being really real. And there's not, and you have to do that on the road. And there's also often you need help on the road,
Yeah.
or someone else needs help. And so there's a lot of opportunity to see kindness among just kind of all kinds of different people, which is another really good thing for perspective shift and just a reminder of how
Abs-
we're all the same.
yeah. It's easier to forget how similar we are and how basic our needs are when we have walls between us and we're making decisions that, on a daily basis might not affect the person next door. But you probably feel those decisions and the circumstances and the outcomes of those decisions a lot more immediately with your neighbors, whoever. But I also think in solitude too. I mean, imagine your relationships to solitude has changed as well.
Absolutely. Particularly like everybody else, I was, affected by COVID. I had been at that point fairly new to van life, but I was doing it where I would go into a city for a couple of weeks and then out into the wild for a couple of weeks. And I was, meeting all kinds of people and going salsa dancing in whatever cities I would come to, and that's that sort of thing. And then COVID came, and I I spent honestly probably 3 months where I did not see people other than to run and like refill my groceries or get my gas. And I mean, I talked to people on the phone, but it was a lot of time of solitude and
Mm.
just really connecting with the world around me, which was out in BLM land, which is the Bureau of Land Management, land use,
Hmm.
empty wild spaces and
Was
national
that
wildlife refuges, and it was wonderful.
so, and immediately wonderful, or was there a period of like, "Woo, I'm alone," or?
Well, there was a period of disconnect. The people that I loved were experiencing a thing in a very different way than I was. So there was that, and I was worried for people, and I was worried for the state of the world. So there was, of course, that. But yeah, pretty immediately wonderful in terms of I had a little bit of time where I thought, I had a few people say, like, do you want to come and join our bubble and wait till this is over? And I was pretty like, no, I just, and I was very happy with that decision. It was a wonderful time for me.
Do you think I'm going back to the original quote that I shared around when you said to be stuck is my greatest fear.
Mhm.
Um, how has that evolved? I know I'm just curious because stuckness lives in a lot of different ways. We can be stuck within our emotions. We can be stuck within a room. What does that stuckness look like for you? What did it look like when you wrote that? And what does it look like now?
Yeah, I think I wrote that pretty recently. I think that's a pretty recent piece of uh, right. I'll tell you the one other thing that we probably you're probably getting to in a bit is that I have recently been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease.
Yeah.
And so it that has been in the last like year and a little bit more, has more than anything changed my relationship to stuckness.
Mm-hmm.
Because initially what alerted to me I'll just say really quickly, it was it's ankylosing spondylitis, which is
Mm-hmm.
in the rheumatoid arthritis family, and where rheumatoid arthritis uh, attacks small joints, ankylosing spondylitis attacks larger joints. But
Yeah.
I was alerted to it through just this pain that came on really swiftly, and I was very unable to move very well for a long time. So I physically was having I mean, I was having to pull myself upstairs, and I was like having a
Mm.
hard time getting out of bed in the morning. So that was a massive change, and I was very I went through a period of being very afraid that like everything was going to change and I wasn't going to be
Mm.
able to be geographically free and I was going to be stuck. And um, then, as life does, I had this sort of parallel braid that happened at the same time that opened me up to this whole different kind of unstuckness. Whereas, like, I've always sort of been someone that's like bucked any sort of constraints. So I seem
Mhm.
like I've been very free. As far as personal expression, as far as uh, just writing the things that I wanted to write, working on writing my memoir and feeling okay to say that, I was really kind of stifled and hadn't done that for many, many years. And so it coincided this having this pain sort of coincided with me having this period of just like expansiveness in terms of creativity and freedom. And I think, it's you find gifts in whatever.
Mhm.
I think I mean, you know, it's weird to talk about in that way, but like when you're in that kind of pain, like everything slides away. There's no more people pleasing. There's no more like
Yeah.
saying yes to everything and like, oh, I can just do 16 hours a day so I can get this done for somebody. And I can also do all the adventures. It's just, I've had to, say yes to only what fills me up and just, there's just not space for anything else.
Yeah.
And that has given way to this like creative freedom, it's freedom of expression that's like just been wow. Just it's
Wow.
been kind of doing something I've always wanted to do. So it's been
Is
very, very fortunate.
I love how you just said that, and the way you're weaving these pieces together. You've had this theme of stuckness, and the first way you broke free of that was through a nomadic lifestyle, and then life's like, we're going to give you another version of stuckness, and you get this chronic illness, and then the thing that you were seeking, probably originally the freedom, you're finding now in to, a layer of that stuckness, which is it's beautiful how life sometimes says, oh, you think you needed this to be free, but now let me show you. So that's, I mean, and never ever do I want to like paint a bow on top of suffering, but it's absolutely fascinating when someone comes to this realization, as I did with the stuckness I felt in my own body, of like, oh, this opened me to a whole nother way of being that is actually freer than I thought when I was thinking I had to get rid of it to be free.
And I have to tell you, Kim, that I came to your work right when I was just still like, what is going on and having this pain and just like
Mm.
having your example of you talking about your own experience and then the people you talked to was just like, I mean, I needed that. So I just wanted
Mm.
to thank you. I'm gonna get choked up.
Mm.
But what the work you do is so important. And
Wow.
like I think of this, this was even more recent. You did an interview with Alyssa Kennedy Jones,
Hmm.
and she talks about this her seizures and this how there's this gorgeousness to it all. And like just to I I was actually sitting waiting for a doctor's appointment as I listened to that. So but I was thinking it gave me permission to be like, yeah, it's okay to see the gift in all of this and
Mm.
to not just only be pushing for how do I fix it? How do I fix it? How do I fix it? So
Yeah.
that was
Oh, I'm so grateful to hear that. And I, I think it's still percolating in the periphery of the society. Society. People are coming to it on their own through physical experiences, but we still, like, largely as collectively, we just want the fix. And then I don't feel like I'm negating, like, that's great. I, will pursue cures. That's great. But when it is the only thing, we lose our sense of self in that, or it gets caught up in living fixed instead of living well. And there are all these little well moments in between. And I hear that in your writing so beautifully. Like, and I know that you've experienced this pain. I interviewed someone with and I'm not going to pronounce it, ankylosing spondylitis.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
interviewed him last year and he was in so much pain. And so I know, I have heard what you experience, and it's no small thing. And then for you to pull up Ruby into a desert landscape and greet the sky and write about that. Here, actually, I'm just going to read something that's just was so beautiful. This was from Sword in the Saguaro. She looks to the skies and sighs. Gentle folds of green-gray hills stretch towards slate-colored foothills and silver mountains that rise like gratitude. The perimeter of her abode is a desert garden, a lanky mesquite, patches of prickly pear, a trio of saguaros without arms, fuzzy cholla. And I just picture you stepping out of your van, maybe in pain, but in such gratitude. Um, so tell me a little bit about the influence of the natural world and your nomading and how that's changed how you think about your own life and even maybe your chronic illness.
Yeah. And I have been definitely less nomadic since this chronic illness is it was about a year and a few months ago where I couldn't ignore the pain. And I have been staying with my sisters and my cousin, who normally I would not be in the Pacific Northwest at this time of year. I would be in the Arizona desert or in the California desert or something. But so just to clarify that point, I have been so fortunate in terms of people just offering support and being there for me and just letting me be near my doctors and be comfortable. And I'm certainly looking forward to getting back more, traveling a little bit more widely than I have, but still the natural world. I think it's a funny. I have a hard time calling it the natural world because I think where everything is the natural world. But yes, like the wild spaces are still just huge. I mean, wherever I'm at, I am looking for a river or lake to walk or a forest to get into. It just recalibrates. I think of the wild is like a mirror for us. I mean, it is, we're all of us were made out of the exact same components. We're going to be returning to the earth where, it's, it's just such a cyclical nature of existence is what we're in the middle of, that we're these tiny little ephemeral moments in this big gorgeous planet. And um I don't know how that relates specifically to my understanding of this chronic illness, but I think it just relates to my understanding of the world,
Yeah.
everything.
Is it a respite for you? I mean, if you wake up, I'm not sure, like, how are your symptoms? Is it sort of a daily thing, or are there flares? And how do you, even when you're not moving Ruby around, how do you navigate your relationship to the trail that you might want to go on, or the tree that's outside of Ruby? Does that change as you're feeling physical pain in your body, or do you seek it even more then?
Probably both. Yes, and and I'm also extremely fortunate that AS has medication that it didn't not terribly long ago have much treatment, and it does now, and I'm responding super well to it. So I am having way fewer limitations physically, and it's kind of a new challenge. Like I need medication that is needs to be refrigerated, and so I've done a bunch of research, and I've found this little like refrigerator that's like that size and can be solar powered, so I can still do long treks if I want to. I mean, I
Yeah.
do ran rubies and a refrigerator, but so yes, and getting outside when I'm even there was when there's flares and when there has been times when I've been moving very, very slowly, I still went out almost every day to move. Uh, and like I said, during the worst periods, I just moved like a bee and
Yeah.
no person. Um, but it still just is like just kind of a reminder. I don't know of a bigger picture that there's
Yeah.
much more going on.
It sounds like that bigger picture, I'm going back again to the stuckness because it seems like
Yeah,
that bigger picture is, it's like you just came into this world going, I need the big picture.
yeah,
And no matter how you're going to get it, I'm even imagining, even in your imagination, in your writing life, you get to visit that. Is that it's actually is something that I read when I read you often are braiding themes together within one essay. So you're looking at maybe the political landscape, and then you're also looking at something that's happening right outside your back door. So let's talk a little bit about your writing life and what that um, how that's been. Have you always been a writer, first of all?
yeah. I've also always wanted to write.
Mhm.
And my straight out of college, I was a journalist for a short bit. And then my entire career has been sort of writing adjacent. I have been an editor for 20 years. I was the managing editor for a nonprofit magazine called The Quick Release that is site bicycling advocacy and done ghost writing and writing for hire. So I've always written, yeah, but not I've this new, and I've always written personal essays that I shared with no one. but but sharing work and looking for a publisher for a memoir I'm working on and stuff that is fairly new the last couple of
Yeah.
years.
Do you feel comfortable talking a little bit about that memoir? Or
Yeah.
yeah, I'd love to. I mean, I know I've read the 6 chapters that you have, but now you're considering bringing another piece that you've been writing into that memoir. So let's share a little bit more about that.
Okay, so the one that is I've shared the 6 chapters with on or on Substack is I sort of conceived of that as a memoir of its own, and there was this 7 month period when I was 30, I believe, that I traveled, sort of meandered along the east coast of the U.S. from West Virginia, and then I ended up in Montreal, Canada, and I was just going to kind of tell that story, and then I'm also working on a memoir. About my daughter. And I was a teen mother, and I gave her up for adoption. And then we reconnected when she turned 18. And so that's the book, the memoir I've been working on that I was hoping to find an agent for, or am hoping to find an agent for. But I started realizing, as you've pointed out, that I really like to braid things, and realizing that I kind of might want to braid that story in. So
Yeah.
I stopped putting the chapters out because I was like, well, let me figure out what exactly I'm going to do with these chapters, and
Mm.
um, before I keep releasing more. So that's I'm working on kind of both of those braids right now.
Yeah. Is there, when you're sharing your own personal stories, I know we often also try to think of like, well, what are the universal themes that this might be relatable? What are some of those themes that you feel like you might be working on with this, braiding these two together?
Um, that's such a good question. I think maybe a universal theme is just the way that different periods of our lives and understanding sort of shape each other. Um, these who is it? Gosh, someone talks about how we're all the different ages that we've ever been. live within us.
Yeah.
And um it's kind of like we're these little, like when I'm writing personal essays, it's like I'm looking back at this creature who was me, and that I'm going to now make into a character, and then this creature who is me, the narrator, that I'm also going to make into a character, and like what did she make of this or that, and kind of each sentence leads to the next. And
Mm-hmm.
I so maybe that I don't know, that's a little bit going off into the weeds there, but I think that just who we are informs who we're going to be,
Yeah.
and who we were. And I don't know, just I think
Is
that's
there
something
is that
we're all.
a does that feel like an act of self-love too, as you look back on your younger self? And for me, I know most memoirs are like the section of life. And because I was just doing this for myself when I started writing the memoir, I was like, I'm going to start with my birth. But then, like, looking back on some of these younger chapters, I hadn't ever. And so, as an adult, to hold myself in those scenes and in those emotions felt like a kind of reconciliation and an act of self love.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think, and just not even just with self, but a reconciliation with like anybody that exists in the world of um, whatever you're writing about. Because I think one of the most important things to me about writing memoir and personal essay where there are other people in your lives that are also going to be made into characters is to look at everybody with as much generosity as you possibly can, which to me is just the honest way of looking at life. I mean, we're all dealing with so much, and we're all, most most all of us doing the very best with what we have. And so kind of going back through those time periods and just looking at everybody and everything in this generous way is really, really helpful.
Yeah. It seems like your nomadic life has also exaggerated that ability to see the many variations of this existence. I think we can find ourselves in our little communities and rarely look outside and go, oh, there's people that think something different. But I would imagine on the road you have met so many different characters.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's true of me. I'm very I want to talk to everybody that I meet. And I do. I talk to a lot of people, and I, uh I'm just drawn to whoever, and definitely talk to people with some very different beliefs than I have, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you find that some of these connections that you make are become lifelong friends?
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
it's like you touch and go, but you also are like, hey, I'm gonna be here and
Yeah.
let's meet
Yeah,
up.
for sure. Yeah, and we also, I mean, nowadays you've got social media and you've got phones, and
Mhm.
it's so easy to know where everybody is.
Yeah.
I met a lot of people on that East Coast journey, which was before we had smartphones, and social media was just sort of brand new. And so a lot of people that I would love to find and reconnect now and have, I don't even know their last name.
Wow. Oh.
I know, isn't that crazy?
But you remember their face and you probably
Yeah,
remember their laugh and a story they told.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. It's funny. That's a lot like what we were saying about Substack. It's like we might not, have that one detail maybe of like what they looked like,
yeah,
but we have this heart and soul and the meaty goodness, but you might
yeah,
not have a phone number to find out.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
um, you so there's this unfixing. Let's go back to the unfixing that you're experiencing now in your body. And to me also when I think about the word unfixed, it's unfixing our ideas of how we need to be in order to live fully, live happily, live whatever. And in our society, we equate stability and fixedness in a way with rootedness, whether that's home or career or relationship. So tell me, how do you define stability in your life?
That's a good question, and for sure something I get asked about a lot. I was this was a couple of years ago, but I was on a date with someone that was sort of new. He was a really sweet guy, and we were walking, and he kept saying, but when are you going to settle? But are you going to settle down? Like, when are you going to settle down? And I kind of thought about it afterwards, and because of course I get asked that question in different ways, but I realized I feel settled. Like, I think for me, stability, I mean, I find it in myself. I find it in my relationships. I find it in my connection with the world. I mean, I think one of my guiding principles in the world, and just the way I show up or try, the way I would aspirationally like to show up in the world is it's attributed to Maya Angelou, but I actually think a playwright said it first. But the whole I'm human, so nothing human can be alien to me. And I really resonate with that, which to me, I think of all of us as community. And so I think that kind of is the reason that for me, stability is not, is being able to move. Like, I mean, we're on this ball that's traveling around the earth at what, like 60 or 70,000 miles, or around the sun, 60 to 70,000 miles an hour, while it's spinning at like 1,000 miles an hour. I mean, movement is what we're doing all the time. And people migrate, and the creatures we share this planet with migrate. And I don't know, to me, feeling stuck, feeling rigid, feeling not open to new ideas or new people or new opportunities feels the opposite of stability to me. So
Wow.
being able to be free, we're going to go back to freedom, and to feel connected to everyone. I don't know,
That feels grounding.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow, that's so beautiful. You were saying you were just said, I think I saw on notes last week or something, you're writing a piece on migration. Is that you? Are you I mean, I imagine your spirit animal has got to be the bird.
I suppose so, yes. Or just anything that moves.
Yeah. Are you identifying with what are you learning about when you're researching this migration?
Well, it's on immigration. And so I'm in
Oh, did
conversation
I
in
misread
migration.
that?
You know what? I probably used the term migration.
Okay.
But I'm in conversation with a woman who's a humanitarian
Yeah.
aid volunteer at the southern border. And so we're talking about the migration of people and
Got it.
the mess of immigration policy uh, that's happening right now. And so it's this both sort of, you know, beautiful stories that just fill you with awe at people's resilience and what they'll do, what people will do to take care of their families and to come to safety. And then this
Then have it
complete
all blow
opposite.
up.
Yeah.
Well, you're the perfect person to be exploring this because, that I, of course, people migrate for a lot of different reasons, but survival is at probably the core of that. And when you're able to, it's a sense of freedom. And like you said, that in that movement, they're finding stability. So I really think that's just so profound what you shared there, and I'm wondering if there's um, it's a lesson that we all need to learn. Are you going to explore this theme a little bit more? How in movement we find stability? Because I want to learn more.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's probably the theme of my life. So yeah,
Yeah,
I think anything that I explore has a little element of that.
yeah, yeah. Do you have in your let's see, it's winter now, but we've got spring coming. What does this look like this year ahead for you? And what does the movement look like for you?
Yeah, That is up in the air. I don't know for sure. I need to do some more labs to make sure that this newest medication I've tried is keeping me stable, which means keeping my inflammation levels down.
Mhm.
Um, and then I have sort of tentative plans to. There's a couple of friends that I do a lot of canyoneering with, often in southern Utah, and we are tentatively talking about doing. I've always wanted to take Ruby down the coast of Baja, Mexico, and
Mhm.
kind of just do the whole go around one down one side and up the other. And so we're
Yeah.
talking about possibly doing that. That would be more fall as
Mhm.
in terms of the best weather time for that. And that would probably give me some space to make sure this medication is
Yeah.
doing what we were hoping.
And so where do you find between now and then, where does your movement live? I know, like you mentioned earlier, creativity. Is that where your space is, your spaciousness is going to be in the next 6, 7, 8 months?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And I'm also, as far as physical movement, a part of AAS is, which I think is a really fortunate part. Um, Movement is really key to staying out of pain. So like
Mhm.
I need to be moving every morning. Like I either swim or uh, hike or yoga most mornings.
Mhm.
So
Do you travel with a journal wherever you go? Like even when you go to the gym to go swim, or do you, and like how do you, because I think of you as you have a very philosophical perspective in the world. And so I imagine you as somebody who's always like, oh, I got to take that note down, or I just had that thought and this has to live here. Is that part of your life?
no,
No.
not as much as no, not as much as you think. I mean, I always have a little log, but no, I don't. I probably should get better at that. Also, I'll make notes to myself
Yeah.
or like send myself texts every once in a while.
Yeah.
Um, but no.
Do you make the discoveries as you're writing then?
Uh, yes. I think yes.
Like
Um,
when you sit down to write, are you the type that has an outline and you know the beginning, the middle, and the end where it's going to go, or are you the type that more is like embodying this poetic place of just letting the words arrive?
yeah, I don't have an outline. I often just start with describing what I see around me or what I saw around me at the time. Um, yeah, I definitely no, don't have, I don't have a plan per se. I just kind of, like I said, I'm like exploring, I don't know what was in my mind at the time and just kind of, yeah, so kind of exploring what I thought and think and mostly what I see.
Mostly what you see. So you're very visual. Your writing is very visual too. I mean, it's visceral. So it goes beyond just what you see. I feel when you write. Um, but there's a visual that I have with your words very clearly. One of the things that you wrote when you were talking about your daughter, um, it was sort of a painful line. But I instantly saw the two paths. You said, how had it not occurred to me that the days would fall like dominoes from a maternity ward in not one, rather two directions? And instantly I was like, here you are living this life and thinking that somehow an adoption would sever yourself from the other life. But is that what you're saying, that it did not?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, that it did. I mean, yeah, my daughter was kind of constantly with me, which is a funny thing to
Wow.
say, all of my life. And then when she and I reconnected when she turned 18, that was
Mm.
just wonderful for both of us. And we're super close. We talk most days on the phone. She,
Is that right?
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
We've been close for the last like 11 years. So,
wow.
but all that time, yeah, her absence was very much a presence in my life
Mm,
uh, in a way that I couldn't, I was very young. I couldn't have
yeah.
anticipated at the time.
Wow. And you have met in person too.
Oh, yeah, she lived with me for a few years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah.
Can I ask, did she reach out to you or did you reach out? She reached out to you. What was that
Yeah.
like?
Well, it was a stipulation of the adoption that she would have my information when she turned 18 should she want it.
Mhm.
Um, so I was very aware of her 18th birthday. Of course, I was always aware of all of her birthdays. But
Mhm.
and like it's really beautiful. I called the adoption agency and it was like because I wanted to make sure they still had my updated information and they had gone out of business, shuttered their doors and done nothing with the files and I was like going like, "Oh my god, how do I find her? Like what should I do?" And then I would say like I can't remember 8 or 9 days after her 18th birthday, she friend requested me on Facebook. She had found me on Facebook. And I was like,
Whoa.
oh my gosh. Yeah. So, yeah. And then we just started talking and talked kind of like nonstop. And then
Must have
a few
been
months-
wild.
it was so wild. And we're so similar. We're very, very
Oh,
similar creatures. Yeah. And just like
wow.
movement and sense of humor and philosophy. And so then it was just a few months later, I went out to where she was living and spent some time with her. And then she came out, spent some time with me. And then not long after that, moved in with me.
Wow.
And I was not in a van. I was in a stable period of my life at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
I, thank
You know,
goodness.
well, but maybe someday she'll be like, "Hey, mom, can I hop in the van with you?"
I know. Well, she thinks she would want to. Oh, we've talked.
Yeah. Oh, so what are some of the challenges? Like if you were to dissuade her from doing the nomadic lifestyle, what are some of the things that really come up for you?
I mean, gosh, there's a lot. You're kind of you need to be able to be happy and comfortable with things changing
Mm.
anytime. And I've had policemen knock on the door at 3 o'clock in the morning and tell me to leave. And you need to not be someone that like feels afraid being alone out because if you're afraid all the time, which it would be easy to be. I don't think there's, I don't stay in places where I think I should legitimately be afraid. But,
Mhm.
you're alone in the middle of the wilderness and you hear the fishes crackling or the wind makes noises. And
Mhm.
so you have to be comfortable with that. Yeah, you just have to be, there's a lot of sort of physical labor involved in just
Yeah.
keeping your life going. And you have to be comfortable with not really being able to for sure know. Well, that's the way I do it. I don't know if that's true for everybody else. I don't necessarily always know where I'm going to be sleeping, but
Yeah.
sometimes I do. Sometimes I plan.
Yeah. But the not knowing is part of the joy of it for you. I'm hearing.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Is that because there's a listening then that comes from that? Um, like I think was it the Saguaro piece where you said we don't need more spears, we need more ears.
Mm,
I would imagine there's an inner listening, obviously listening to others as well, but an inner listening that comes from a solitary life, from not always knowing where you're going to sleep. And then maybe another other word is intuition. Do you feel like that's something that you're engaged with this lifestyle?
yeah, I think so. I think so, and I think one of my favorite characteristics in myself or anybody really is curiosity. And
Mm,
I think if you're certain, um, there's just a lot less room for curiosity and for just exploration. Um, I think you and I had an exchange where we were talking about like uncertainty versus hope. And to me, uncertainty is sort of a requirement of hope. Because if you're
mm,
certain, what are you hoping for? And I think hope is a really beautiful uh, motivator and a beautiful, it's God, we need it more than ever right
yeah,
now.
yeah.
Um, so think uncertainty certainly opens up space for that. And it's the thing that's true. We're
It's
not certain about anything,
yeah.
really.
you said also that it opens you up to this, on the challenging side, things are always changing. So you're getting life, you're getting the truths about life in a very kind of microscopic kind of way, without all the stuff that we pad our lives with to pretend that they don't exist.
For sure.
But I mean, it is kind of a more nomadic, but also monastic life, in that sense that you're getting these real. I just thought of Dylan, the gentleman that I was working with the last couple of years to write the book on his experience with ALS. And he always talked about, well, in this one essay he wrote about how the disease ALS is just made him an extreme version of universal truths. Yeah. Yeah. And so it's, I think in a way your chosen lifestyle, and even having a chronic illness within that lifestyle, is also giving you this extreme version of universal truths, um, which is quite beautiful.
That's a generous way of saying thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah. I really admire your choices, and I see how they. Well, I see. I mean, I've known you for 2 years, but I read how they are shaping you,
Yeah.
and in such a profound way. How do you um, continue to foster and nurture this optimism and this playfulness and this hope in the world where you know for certain that it is uncertainty and change?
Yeah. That's a great question. I mean, I think continuing to you to I was gonna say to be able to evolve, to be able to open to new things, like for right now writing, um and hopefully in the foreseeable future, writing is really filling me up, is really bringing me and that sort of expansiveness that I have long craved in somewhat of a more profound way than the physical movement, which I, don't want to, be away from. I would love to be geographically and physically free for as long as I want. But if you can be free, I don't know, inside in terms of expression and um, in that way that's a harder thing to lose no matter what happens. So I think just moving, I think as long as I'm happy, as long as I feel like I'm evolving and growing and changing perspectives that don't really make sense anymore, and
Yeah.
learning and meeting new people and
Oh, that was, I love what you just shared. I can't wait to like put it in bold and make it big, because there there is a sense of this um, hope that you carry in the uncertainty, and but it doesn't stop there. It's like the uncertainty opens you up to curiosity and kindness and compassion and reverence and all of these. It's like, oh, if only we could all just crack that shell open that we need so badly to be firm and strong. And when it cracks open, you're like, oh my God, it's so beautiful here. And I guess that's what I hear you saying.
thank you. That's what I'm saying, but I'm love that you hear
I do hear that, and I'm not the only one, because I read comments, and many people feel that in your words. Um, I love this quote. The desert, because the desert is really where you prefer to be, correct? That's
during the winter.
you're in the winter. You
Like
talk
all, I
about,
love the ocean, I love forests,
mm,
I love places.
you love it all. That's right. You're
That's,
nomadic.
you write about the desert a lot. Yes.
You talk about rolling down the window and feeling the desert's gamey tongue on your cheek. Like, oh, the visual of that is just so sweet. And I mean, to me, it's sweet. Maybe some people would be like, ew, God. But to me, it's like, oh, bring on the gamey tongue. Um, Do you, before,
It's a
yeah, you like the gamey tongue too.
Yep.
So thank you so much for sharing this time.
This has
This
been
is
so wonderful.
really, really sweet to connect with you. And I mean that you have this hard-earned wisdom that is not something that comes from choosing the comfortable life. And whether you choose it or not, I think that's a little bit of both for you. But that's an inspiration for many of us to go, oh, yeah, I can strip these layers and still find the lasting kind of peace and happiness that you are finding. So thank you.